TJ, it's great to be here with you today and to rekindle our friendship.
Yeah, thank you, Noah.
And my respect for you is without bounds. I think that you are a really good guy with really a lot of integrity in everything that you're doing in life. And I wanted to ask you how, in your life, faith has played a role at some of the dramatic times in your life.
Yeah, thank you, Noah. And just to say to you too, it's such an honor being with you here in this moment. And I love what you do, what you're doing in the world as well. And I feel like this is just a perfect partnership today.
Thank you.
I've had some many dark experiences in my life, including an early experience in my life of closing off and shutting down. And I remember like it was yesterday at age 7, really closing off and becoming afraid of the world and making some pretty big decisions. So I walked around in the world from 7 until 14, quite frankly, when I started using drugs and alcohol and got some relief from that. I got sober at age 20, and I met a woman named Mary Helen Brownell that changed my life. She was a devotee of Sai Baba's in India and really introduced me to spiritual concepts that I had never heard before. And I went on this incredible inner journey. So from that moment until now, spirituality has always played a really important role.
I early on, I wrote a note to some people that said that God is never so with us as when we feel alone. Yeah. And I think that we tend to forget that we're all alone, but we're all alone together. And when we connect with that, then when we're sensitized to our own isolation, then we're empathetic to the isolation that every other person is experiencing, and that enters us into a very sacred brother and sisterhood. And I mention this because when we talk about the subject of faith, people then tend to deify it and think of it as a kind of Sunday pew issue. But our ability to have faith in God is premised on our ability to have faith in others, and our ability to have faith in others is premised on our ability to have faith in ourselves.
Yeah,
was that a big turning point in your life when you realized that whatever the world turned to your doorstep was the world's business, but you had to enter into a state of faith with yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. And going back to my friend Mary Helen, who really changed my life, she would say to me over and over again in her beautiful Southern accent, "Darling, you're so precious." And I couldn't take that in. I had separated so much from myself, and I'd become so spiritually bankrupt that I literally couldn't hear that kindness. So it was her presence and her ability to see that in me that ultimately shifted me. And the way that plays with faith is I recognized that she could see that for me at a time when I wasn't capable of that for myself. And that experience has impacted and influenced me in so many ways, because I recognize now that that's what I get to do for another person, being that presence for them in their life.
It's so amazing when you realize that you can't go through the door for anyone else in their life, but you can say, "My friend, there is a door, and here is the door."
Yeah.
Right? How they deal with that portal into themselves and into their relationship with the divine is their work. You can't do anybody else's work for them.
Yeah.
But what you do in your work, and I'm trying to do in mine, is to say, I'm a truth teller.
Yeah.
I can't take you through the door, but I can tell you there is a door.
Yeah.
Right?
Without a
And
doubt.
prayer is a path where there is none.
Yes, absolutely. And it's by being a presence for and creating a space for someone to have their own awakening, whatever that means for them, that really demonstrates something really powerful. In other words, I don't really, as a spiritual counselor and as the spiritual director at Foundation's outpatient program, I'm not there to do anything for someone, but to create a space, an opening. And as you said so beautifully, then they get to walk through that door at the time that they feel ready for that.
Yeah, I was listening that there's so many people who are on the down negative side of love in this regard. They feel they are never loved for who they are and are loved for who they aren't.
Yes.
Right? And so you live in this dark space. Now, what's interesting about this is that if you create negative space, you can find positive space. So if you find, knowing where you don't fit is okay. Where you don't belong is okay. Because it affords you a perspective that you wouldn't have had otherwise if everybody was so. And so it's about granting yourself the relationship with yourself. And curiously, that affords us the opportunity to have a higher relationship.
Yes.
And it's I tell people that the only way you can take a breath is by releasing your breath. So you have to release your self-importance in order to be made greater.
Yeah, yeah. You know, in the work that I do, it seems that really all humans, but certainly people that are coming out of an addiction, have created or have some beliefs about themselves, some what I call core false beliefs. I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable, I'm not worthy. And then there's these strategies on how to survive that. And I know that that was certainly true in my life as I made the decision that there was something wrong with me, and I moved into a sense of shame about myself in the world, and then all these strategies to try to survive that.
One of the, I met somebody at one of the foundation facilities, and they said to me, I feel like I've so disappointed my parents. And I said to him, you're not here to meet your parents' expectations. You are here to meet your expectations. Expect more, accept less. Be there. A lot of us were raised to think that, a lot of us were raised to think that beating ourselves up is an act of character. But self-abuse never serves. Self-accountability does serve.
Yes.
Because so if you beat somebody up for long enough and tell them they're not worthy, if you tell a child he's a fool for long enough, you will be a prophet.
Yeah.
Right? So the business was not to be, because when you say to people there's no shame in this, a lot of people on the outside will say, well, there should be shame. These people have put themselves in this position. I said, lose shame. Shame is a soul-eating emotion, says Jung. Right? Shame is somebody else's business. That's like guilt. That's somebody else's business. What we're saying here is to be self-abusive about what you did doesn't serve, but to be self-accountable does. So we're not diminishing self-accountability. We're just not into self-abuse.
Absolutely. You know, you said it almost exactly the way I write it in my book. I say self-criticism is never useful. Self-accountability is that doorway for us to make changes. Because as long as I have it trapped in the shadow, and to bring up Carl Jung again, as long as it's living in the shadow, it's running my life and calling it fate, as he said. It's not until we bring it into conscious awareness that we recognize we have a choice. And that really is so much to me about the spiritual work that we do with people coming out of an addiction. Most of it is living in that unconscious or subconscious. And so creating a space for that to be brought to the surface, to recognize that, as you said so perfectly, that as long as we're continuing to believe in these ideas of separation, not good enough, there's something wrong with me, we can't actually ever heal because we're living in that toxic
No, we're starting
shell.
from a false premise.
Yeah.
I say to people, if every architect will tell you that the nature of the foundation predetermines the height of that building. So if you're not prepared to deal with the foundational issues in your life, that already decides that you're going to be tremulous in almost every circumstance. And what I found in my life, in my own vulnerability, in my own experience of being less than I might have been for myself, where I tell people where I had done things where I thought I was getting away with something and I was giving away something in the process. What I have found is that prayer, having faith, which brought me into a state of grace, allowed me the company, the faith that I could take that step. And it is not something that you can ever achieve by reason. All first steps in faith by Kierkegaardian are a leap of faith, right? So you can't get there by reason. So if people are emotionally based and you try to give them all the reasons why they shouldn't feel this way, it has no raison d'etre to them, because their premise isn't reason based, it's emotion based. So what happens is and so this allows us, faith allows us to take an emotional leap that we wouldn't otherwise take, because it reminds us we're not alone.
Yeah, beautifully
Right? We're not
said.
disconnected. As you put it, how it was your brokenness.
Yes.
Right, your brokenness, the brokenness in yourself.
Yes.
You know, there's this legend in mystical Judaism that we're born sort of fractured, And we're trying to spend our life putting ourselves together, our male with our female side, our female, that whole aspect. And this act of tikkun, they call it, of coming together, when you do that, you make the world whole.
Yes.
Right? So when you somehow, when Dumas, I think, or Victor Hugo said, if you want to clean the world, sweep your porch.
Absolutely.
So when you make yourself whole, when you're doing that, out of it, you have been such an ally to so many people in making yourself whole. TJ, you've helped so many people.
Oh, thank you, Noah.
You know, like let me help you put a cast on that so you can walk again.
Yeah, and I love that you're talking about that fragmented self, because to me that really is what I see in really all humans that I know, that we come into this world and I see, if you look at a small child, you see that presence, that curiosity, that oneness really with all of life. And then something happens. You know, I call it the domestication of the human. I got that from the Four Agreements, Don Miguel Ruiz.
Yeah.
When we become domesticated in that way, we are taught that we are separate. We're taught there's something wrong with us. And then we have this sense of ourself that isn't the truth, and we're walking around with this great lie.
Well,
right?
part of it, I call a lot of this are going away presents, things we got from our parents that we never knew we got. There's an old line about a woman puts her hand in her arm in a sweater, now comes her mother's hand. And the cartoonist Pfeiffer says, because we get it from both parents, right? Where we get inherited this brokenness, because it's the brokenness of what appears to be common sense, because it's what they were they're not bad, they just were adopting what they, Jules Pfeiffer said, I inherited my father's walk, my father's laugh, my father's sense of style, and my mother's intense dislike for my father. So you get the whole deal. So you just have to decide you have to decide how you're going to walk your walk. And the best definition of neurotic behavior is when you choose to do something which is negative but familiar over something which is healthy but new.
Yes, and you know, I walked around, and what I see in the clients that I work with, when we're walking around with this sense of brokenness, of separateness, we're really walking around, the way I say it is, it's like we have our umbilical cord in our hand trying to plug into anything that will feed us, right? And of course, there's a healthy and an unhealthy spectrum in all of that. We're not actually wanting to reframe and find new strategies. This is about getting down to that core foundation that you spoke of and really coming to a place of recognizing what are those core ideas, those core beliefs, when we unlearn those, because to me, this is far more about unlearning than it is about learning. When we're willing to unlearn those and return to that place of presence, that place of connection, which is really the truth of who we are, to me, that's inherently spiritual.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think that most people, really, at the end of the day, they're not worried about going crazy. They're more worried about going sane.
Exactly, you know? Without a doubt.
I think that's it. And there's a couple of thoughts on this. One, the shared brokenness in all of us that we tend to not realize. Data to say this, not because whatever authority I might lend by this conversation, the average child will fall 300 times before they learn to walk.
Right.
So we've all fallen and fallen and fallen again, anybody standing on their own 2 feet. And two, there's no mission accomplished. So the brokenness, we feel at 2, we can feel at 12, we can feel at 22,
Absolutely.
We can feel great at 32 and be all screwed up at 42.
Yes.
Right? There's all these studies done with delayed maturation with physicians who go from being bright students to shamans without ever passing through experience. So you can wake up and be broken at 42 in ways that you never knew. I spent a lot of time talking to people who are immensely wealthy, who never dealt with anything other than financial success as their quid pro quo for a successful life, only to wake up and say, the drum's beating a little hollow. Right, and there are no luggage racks on hearse.
Yes.
You know, what am I missing here? So, have you found that the work you do is the work you're doing, if you will?
Oh, absolutely, without a doubt. My entire story, everything that happened to me, and my own reintegration, because that really is, to me, what this is about. What I have seen as the 3 core underlying issues of addiction are toxic shame, spiritual disconnection, and unresolved trauma. And so when we come in and recognize those 3, this is really about unlearning all those beliefs, unlearning all those ideas we've collected about ourselves. And that really has been my own journey. My own journey is a return to wholeness, letting go of that idea of a fragmented or broken
And the
self.
difference between giving up and letting go.
Yes,
right.
They feel similar and they're very different.
Yeah, they're entirely different. It's very uncomfortable in the Western world because it's always an approach and conquer situation. But the idea, they asked the Zen masters one time how they can ride without holding on. the horses, and they said, ride the horse in the direction it's going. Right? So you don't have to hold on so tightly in life if you would take it in that way. When you were saying this about these three areas where I say to people, what makes you uncomfortable? And they say, well, I say, well, that's where your work begins.
Yeah.
Right? That's where the work is at. And when school is out, school is in.
Right.
Right. That's the work, and it's not like you. I remember there's something I wrote. Well, I'm not young enough to know everything anime.
Without a doubt.
Right.
Yes.
So you go through that. If I only knew now what I thought I knew then.
Right.
Right. And so I saw that kind of but the courage to do that, TJ. The courage to do that in your life. That's something that you can share with other people. It's so remarkable. Or we can in conversations remind people that strength isn't the absence of weakness, but how we wrestle with it.
Absolutely. And really, it's those dark times, whether it's an addiction or a loss, the children leaving home. As you said so beautifully, I work with a lot of clients that they've achieved everything in the material realm that should have brought them happiness in their mind. And then there's that moment where like, wow, this didn't happen. I think it's Jim Carrey that said, I wish everyone to be rich and famous to realize that's not it.
Johnny Carson had something along that line. Said there must be more to life than having everything.
Yes.
Right. There is what you were talking. What you're talking about is so right on. And Aristotle said that that honesty is the portal to all wisdom. And by all regards, Aristotle's a pretty bright guy. What I say to that is, if honesty is the portal to all wisdom, humility is the portal to all honesty. The ability to be all right with being humble to yourself, not too humble as half proud, cautious of that, if you would, but to be able to deal with the humility that I have been broken, that I have felt disgraced, that I have disappointed any of those things, to come to it, not to be convicted of it, but to have the work of it.
Yeah.
Right? To do it, right? There's all of us are the bars in the prisons that we inhabit.
Without a doubt. And certainly I have constructed my own prison many, many times. Sometimes literally, sometimes figuratively, but maybe that's for another time.
Right. But what you found miraculously in its own way, that sometimes the way to get between the bars is to diminish your self-importance and be honest with yourself.
There you go. Great metaphor. Absolutely.
I had never thought about it. That's why you slip between the bars, is to tuck in your ego, because you're not like that big bullfrog that blows himself up and can't, There's a great story about how they catch monkeys in South America. What they do is they put these jars just underground, they fill them with nuts with a little small top. And the baby monkeys come and they put their hand in the jar to grab the nuts. And if with their hands filled with the nuts, they can't pull it out of the jar. And they won't let go. Right? So what they think is going to feed them is in fact going to capture them.
Yes. And
right?
Yeah.
The seduction in life is a self-seduction. It's a self-enslavement in many regards.
Yeah, without a doubt. So that's why authenticity, vulnerability are the cornerstones to me of getting us to really reintegrate and to come back to a place of wholeness. Because without me authentically showing up in the room, and I think that's really, to me, that's really the work that I do and the work that we do, is being a presence for someone to do that. As we said earlier, we don't walk through that door with someone. We don't certainly push someone through that door, or even guide them through the door, but create a space where they can walk through that door.
It's their door into their life. That's their sacred right. We can only assure them there is a door, and here it is.
Yeah, and what I love about prayer is this simply, that the only real prayer that we really ever need to say is thank you. Right? The role of gratitude, I think, is so important, because praying from the place of what I have to be grateful for is really different than praying from a place of please give me. Because that, many people have tried that. And
I say people is, prayer is a thank you note.
Yes.
Right? If you would. Don't forget to send your thank you notes.
Yeah.
Your mother would always tell you. I've worked on a dialectic in this. When you said this, I'm so glad to see you. I'm so glad to see you. I want to tell you that I work this dialectic. It's taken me a lifetime to come to these steps. Just stay. In gratitude, find prayer. In prayer, find faith. In faith, find grace.
Yes.
In grace, find peace. In peace, find gratitude.
And back at the beginning, isn't that perfect? That perfect cycle.
That's-
I'm reminded of David Hawkins' book, Power versus Force, when he talks about, I've never actually read the book, but simply that title, the difference that we can be in the world as a force or really stepping into power. And to me, everything you just said involves us letting go of force, letting go of me thinking I need to do it. And as you referenced with the Zen master, letting go and let the horse take me where it will. That to me is the greatest spiritual awakening, is being at one with the flow of life, no longer resisting, no longer struggling.
Be like water.
Yeah.
What people tend to forget, so typical, we're here on the edge of the Pacific. The human body is made up of 75% water.
And so is the earth.
And so is the earth.
Yeah.
Right? So when we say be like water, we're not saying something, oh, that's so, touchy-feely. What does that mean? It just really means be who you are.
Yeah.
Right? Don't fight it. Don't end. Yeah. It's strange because when you try to grasp power, it eludes you. Mm-hmm. It's as if you were to try and hold what was really valuable in your hand, and the tighter you clenched it, the more the grains dribbled up between your fingers, right? And you'll see it all at the bottom of your feet.
Yeah, and returning to the conversation where we had about the sense of a broken self, as long as I believe, or as long as any of us believe we're a broken self, then we are going to be trying to grab something outside of us. And to me, that's addiction. Very simply said, a sense that there's something fragmented or broken here, and something outside of me will bring me relief. And until we come to the place where we're ready to let go of that, unlearn that, and in an authentic way connect with that deep spiritual sense, which is, as you're saying, returning to our authentic state of being, be like water, that which we are, can we then let go of, as you said with the monkeys, let that go.
If it's so. A lot of people think that the relationship of faith is a vertical line between you and God, and I'm sure God is in a state is appreciative for the love that we express to God, but since the first 5 commandments are between man and God, the second 5 are between man and man. I think God's saying, if you want to show appreciation for me, why don't you show appreciation for the people around you? People of all faiths are of one faith if their religion is kindness. Right, this line in his book, so when you think it's a vertical line, tend to think of it as a horizontal line. Can you be loving to the people around you? And the ability to be loving to the people around you is an internal journey.
Yeah.
So from the internal, you can go horizontal, which enters you into a relationship with the divine at a vertical level. Mm-hmm. And it's not the other way around. So people say, how do I begin a relationship with God? Well, I'll tell you how you begin a relationship with God. You begin a relationship with God by being self-loving.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Well, because that's essentially who and what we are, right? Talk about knowing our true nature. Our true nature is divinity. Our true nature is oneness with what we might call God or source or love. And when we come to that place, in other words, when we let go of all the stories that we've collected about this, we do return to that simple knowing of the ultimate truth of who we are, which is one with this source.
I'll tell you, in the beginning of the Bible, holy to Judeo-Christian Islamic tradition, God blows into the earth. They call it the red earth, and the word for red in Hebrew is Adam. That's why the first man is named Adam. Mm-hmm. So we have Adam. So God blows into the earth and creates the first person. Well, that breath that's in this first person means this first person is literally inspired by God, filled by God. Mm-hmm. But this person can't hold that breath, so the very first breath that was ever breathed inspiring us has been exhaled and breathed by every other person on the planet. Yeah. So when we breathe together, we are conspiring. Mm-hmm. So we are conspiring because we are inspired. Mm-hmm. We are all filled with the breath of God, and we've all been sharing it. To know that's the case is all you have to do. You don't have to read it in a black book. You don't have to do it, listen, because Noah's saying it or TJ saying whatever, credibility. You only have to say, how long can you hold your breath?
Absolutely.
There's the truth of it.
Yeah.
That's the inspiration of the faith in in our lives.
Well, and that's what I love about you, Noah. Here we are, breathing together, having that be our work and having that be our life mission.
I have one word to say.
Yeah.
Ditto.
Thank you. Thank you.